Welcome to the Your Vote 2018 Gubernatorial Debate, presented by Arizona Public Media, KJZZ, and the Arizona Daily Star. Tonight's moderator is Lorraine Rivera.
Good evening. We'll spend the next hour with the 2018 candidates for Arizona's governor, Republican incumbent Doug Ducey, and Democratic challenger David Garcia. Mr. Ducey, Mr. Garcia, thank you for being here. Also here in the studio are Arizona Public Media's political reporter Christopher Conover, and from our debate partners, Steve Goldstein of our sister station in Phoenix, KJZZ, and Joe Ferguson of the Arizona Daily Star. Before we begin, here are the rules for tonight's discussion. Each candidate will get a 90-second opening statement and a 1-minute closing statement. In between, our panel of journalists will ask questions from a list they've prepared. The candidates have not seen the questions. The questions will be directed to one candidate who will have 1 minute to respond. Then the other candidate will have 30 seconds to rebut. If one of our journalists has a follow-up question, both candidates will have 45 seconds to respond. We'll alternate who gets each question, and we will strictly enforce the time limits. Now for opening statements, first based on a drawing beforehand, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. I'm excited to be in Tucson tonight. My name is David Garcia, and I am running to be governor of my home state. My story is Arizona's story. I'm a fourth-generation Arizonan, a product of Arizona's public schools, the first in my family to go to college, an Army veteran, a teacher, and a father of two amazing girls. And I am running to build the state that built me. I jumped into this race because at the end of 4 years, Doug Ducey's administration is leaving behind a slew of half measures and broken promises. Our education system is still in crisis. Our state is not secure because we are unable, the Department of Public Safety, to patrol our highways 24/7. And Doug Ducey's economy is focused on those at the top, leaving behind the rest of us. Doug Ducey has been ineffective and has failed because he's a follower and not a leader. And he's not looking out for all of Arizona. We need somebody from us, for us. Somebody who is ready to fight for the working people of Arizona. I will be that governor, and I look forward to earning your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. And now, Mr. Ducey, your opening statement.
Thank you, Lorraine. My name is Doug Ducey, and on behalf of my wife, Angela, we'll be married 28 years this October, and my three sons, Jack, Joe, and Sam, it has been my honor to be your governor these past 4 years. I've worked hard to bring business principles to state government, and Arizona is a different state today than it was 4 years ago. Our budget was broken, our education system was mired in a years-long lawsuit, and our economy was flat. Today, our budget is balanced. The lawsuits are behind us, and our economy is booming to a degree where we can deliver teacher pay raises of 20% to our public K-12 education teachers with more to do. Our relationship with Mexico has never been better, and we're able to focus on border security. I'm running for governor because I want to secure Arizona's future, and there's a lot more work to do. I've been to Southern Arizona 56 times since I've been elected. I realize that the issues in Tucson and Pima County are special, unique, and different. And I'm looking forward to the discussion about what we've been able to do to get Arizona heading in the right direction, and I'd like to do it for the next 4 years. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Ducey. Now on to the questions. This first round will be on education. The first question goes to Mr. Garcia from Arizona Public Media's Christopher Conover.
Mr. Garcia, at the end of the last school year, teachers walked off the job asking for a 20% pay raise. If Arizona were to get more money for K-12 education, knowing that money does not always improve things, what requirements would you put on the spending for additional dollars, and what requirements would you put on specific districts for spending those dollars?
So to begin, you got to understand that at the end of 4 years, when Doug Ducey walked in, our education system was in crisis, and it's still in crisis today as thousands of teachers, the largest walkout in history, happened. And one of the things that's key there that I think Doug Ducey has misinterpreted is this is not about just teacher pay raises. Educators have made it clear that they are looking to improve public schools. That includes teacher pay raises, but it also includes dollars for the education support professionals that make our schools great places to teach and learn. And that is the reason why they're looking for improvement and for investment in everyone who helps our students. First person that my daughter meets every day is Miss Melanie, the bus driver, and I think Miss Melanie should be included. With respect to moving forward, in my opinion, in addition to pay raises, we need to move to become the most innovative public school system in the country. And that means stepping away from our fascination with standardized testing in Arizona.
Mr. Garcia, thank you. Mr. Ducey, you have 30 seconds for a response.
Well, I came into office 4 years ago. We had a $1 billion budget deficit. We settled that lawsuit with Proposition 123. We were able to extend Proposition 301. We've got a 20% pay increase for our teachers, and we've got a teachers academy that's going to help solve the teachers crisis. There's so much more we can do in K-12 education, but we have a momentum right now. I want to continue to build on that momentum. What you didn't hear from Mr. Garcia was a plan. There is no plan that he has for K-12 education. We're going to deliver that 20% pay increase to our teachers.
We'll move on to the next question. Is from Steve Goldstein of KJZZ for Mr. Ducey.
Mr. Ducey, when teachers walk out of the classroom asking for that 20% raise, you initially indicated you didn't think they understood the education funding. Ultimately, you and the legislature did come up with a plan for close to 20% over the course of 3 years. And it seemed to flip quite quickly. So I guess the question is, how are you able to change gears so swiftly to find that money?
Well, first, I want to say I'm on the side of the teachers. I've been working very hard to get more money into K-12 education. That's part of why we worked so hard on the initiatives we put forward in those first 4 years. We were able to get a 20% pay increase advance appropriated to our teachers because our general fund is overflowing with dollars. Our economy is booming right now in the state of Arizona, and the CBO put out a report on April 11th that showed a $1.5 billion surplus in the state of Arizona. And what I wanted to do was communicate to our teachers the commitment that we would make to them going forward. Now, you'll remember, Steve, in the State of the State, that I was able to talk about restoring additional assistance, $100 million last year and $371 million over the next 4 years. More is needed, but we're off to a good start, and we are getting these dollars to our teachers in southern Arizona as well.
Mr. Garcia, you have 30 seconds for a response.
Doug Ducey's quick reversal with Red for Ed is an example of him being a follower, not a leader. Education funding has been a problem since the beginning of his administration. And prior to teachers walking out, all he said he could afford was a 2% raise over 4 years. And it was only after pressure and political pressure of losing his position that he suddenly found the courage to do something at that point. With respect to a plan, I do have a plan. We've had a detailed plan since March, and I look forward to sharing it with the voters.
Since David called me out there, Lorraine, can I address that? Can I address what he said?
Sure, Governor.
So what we were able to do in terms of teacher pay from 2015 through this last session was a 9% increase. And these were dollars available for teacher salaries and for hiring teachers. The 20 for 20 plan happened after that. I was in a straitjacket. Our economy was flat. Like I said, we had a $1 billion budget deficit. What leaders do is they solve problems and then they address needs. I'm thrilled that we were able to get these dollars to our teachers, and there's more behind that.
Let's move on to the next education question, which comes from Joe Ferguson of the Arizona Daily Star. It's for Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia, it's estimated that 50% of Arizona families send their children to a school outside the district boundaries, whether it be another public school, a charter, or a private school. Does that translate into parents wanting choice? And why shouldn't that child's tax dollars go to support their child's education?
I believe that school choice is something that parents are certainly looking for, but I look at school choice differently. You see, one of the things that I believe the legislature has gotten very wrong is they believe that only parents who have taken their children out of traditional public schools in some way have made a choice. That's not true. We have hundreds of thousands of parents who are choosing to be in traditional public schools. I am one of them. And I believe that the legislature needs to honor their choice as well. And so from my perspective, parents going to the neighborhood school is a choice, and we need to honor that choice. In terms of money, what has been clear is that the governor, Mr. Ducey, put forward a plan to expand empowerment scholarships, effectively vouchers. It was brought on by outside interests who pushed him to do this, and the people of Arizona put it on the ballot because it is not right for our state. The parents of Arizona said they're ready to invest in our public schools instead of having dollars exit to private schools.
Mr. Ducey, you have 30 seconds for a response.
We put together a website because David's going to say a lot of things tonight that are deceiving. That website is factcheckgarcia.com, factcheckgarcia.com. The fact of the matter is I'm for more choice. David's for less choice. And I want to see more choice for our parents. I want parents to be able to send their children to the school that they would like to send them to. I want to see all of our kids in Arizona. We have 1.1 million public school children have access to an excellent education. That's what we've worked on. That's what we'll continue to work on.
May I address the website?
Before we move on,
May I address the
quick
website?
reminder, real
Mr.
quick.
Ducey, have an
We're
opportunity.
sticking-
Mr. Ducey is
Garcia,
going to...
we're sticking to the 1 minute response.
I understand,
30
and you
second rebuttal.
gave Mr. Ducey the opportunity. I'd like
Go
to
ahead.
say, Mr. Ducey is going to refer to this website several times. And if you go there, take a look at what it says about the character of the man. That after 4 years in the state's highest office, what he is resorting to is negativity and an amateurish hit site because he does not have a record to stand on. I think it's disgraceful, and I think it's the kind of negativity that people are finished with here in Arizona.
Lorraine.
Governor, please, 30 seconds.
The facts matter. And if you want the facts, go to factcheckgarcia.com and judge for yourself. David, you're a college professor, and you understand the importance of words, accuracy, and facts. And you can get the facts at factcheckgarcia.com.
All right, gentlemen, I want to remind you we want to honor the format, the 1 minute response, 30 second rebuttal. The next question is from Christopher Conover for Governor Ducey.
Mr. Ducey, let's get back to empowerment scholarships. The bill that was passed by the legislature and has now been referred to the ballot as Prop 305, many of the Republican state lawmakers who voted for that are now campaigning against it, as are national school choice groups. Where do you stand on the expansion of empowerment scholarships at this point? And if voters overwhelmingly reject that measure, will you commit to not signing any legislation to expand empowerment scholarships during your second term?
Well, first, let me explain these educational savings accounts, as I refer to them. We don't have vouchers in the state of Arizona. The Supreme Court's already ruled on this. These educational savings accounts already exist in our state. And there are stories like Kathy Visser, whose son Jordan was diagnosed with cerebral palsy and autism. And Jordan is benefiting from the educational therapy that is available from these educational savings accounts. There was a great article up north about a young man who's blind, who's a freshman and scored 2 touchdowns this past weekend. His educational savings accounts pay for his Braille books. David Garcia would take away his educational savings accounts. Doug Ducey would want to expand those educational savings accounts because not everyone is in a designated population that is best for them. I think it's parents that make the best decision. So I'm a yes on Proposition 305. But regardless of what happens with the vote, there's going to be more work that needs to be done in terms of school reform, and I'm committing to it.
Mr. Garcia, 30 seconds.
I believe parents do need to make that decision. And it's parents who have brought Proposition 305 to the ballot. I'm against Proposition 305, but let's be clear that empowerment scholarships work just like vouchers. They take money out of public schools and put them into private schools. And the end result, what Doug Ducey wants, is to privatize our public education system. And if that happens, then we're going to have a society of haves and have-nots immediately. And I'm going to do everything I can as governor to make sure it doesn't and to defend our public education.
Lorraine, I've got to address that. David's on the record that he is against all ESAs. He would eliminate all educational savings accounts. That would take the dollars away from a Jordan Visser or this young man in his Braille books. I think it's a bad idea. The program that we put forward is limited and it's gradual and it can help kids that need it. That's what I'm for. I want to see every kid in our state have an opportunity to an excellent education, and sometimes choice and innovation can be part of it, and we can protect our entire system doing that.
Gentlemen, we have a lot of questions about education. Let's move on to the next one from Steve Goldstein. This one is for you, Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia, Democrats have long pushed for charter school reform. There have been concerns expressed in a recent investigative reporting series by the Arizona Republic. If elected, what reforms would you as governor take in the first legislative session to try to reform charter schools? Some specifics, please.
This is another example of Doug Ducey being a follower and not a leader. The issues going on with charter schools with respect to the self-dealing, with respect to millions of dollars going to CEOs instead of classrooms, has been in place the entire 4 years that he has been in office. And only now is he talking about reform for charter school accountability. Again, as a follower, not a leader. I will say the same thing I've been saying for years, and I said the same thing in 2014. We need more transparency and accountability for charter schools so that we have an understanding of how public dollars are being used. We can understand who is self-dealing, who the bad actors are, and that procurement laws are being followed. But on the other hand, we also need more flexibility for our traditional public schools to innovate so that they can have a chance to create innovative schools, for example, like in downtown Phoenix, where the Phoenix Union High School District has created a coding academy on their own. And we need that kind of flexibility for traditional public schools too. One set of rules for all schools we call public.
Mr. Ducey, 30 seconds.
I'm a fan of public district schools, and I'm a fan of public charter schools. I think it's part of the reason why Arizona kids are improving faster in math and reading than any other kids in the country. Where we do need reforms, I would like to address that. Transparency, accountability, financial reporting, and how boards are put together. And David may be able to speak to this more clearly than I am. He's part of the organization put the framework together for charters. He served on a charter school board. He missed more than half the meetings.
All right, the next question is from Joe Ferguson from the Arizona Daily Star for Mr. Ducey.
Mr. Ducey, some of the state business leaders have been outspoken in calling for increasing sales taxes to bring more money into K-12 education. Are there any circumstances where you'd support raising taxes to increase funding for K through 12?
Well, I want to see more funding for K through 12. Look at my record over the last 4 years. We've put $2.7 billion additional dollars into K-12 education. We've put $1 million from a bonding perspective for our universities, and this is from good budgeting, being responsible, and having a growing economy. And now that our economy is growing, it is the time for tax reform. And when you look at our income tax, our sales tax, and our property tax, it gives us the opportunity to reform it in a way that can bring additional dollars into our K-12 education system while also having a growing economy. My plan is dramatically different than my opponent's plan. My opponent is on the record that he would like to double income taxes in the state of Arizona, putting us at the level of a New York, a Massachusetts, or Bernie Sanders, Vermont. I believe that would kill Arizona's economy. All the great companies that I'm going to talk about that are moving here and investing here would fly over us to Texas or Nevada if David Garcia's plan on taxes were to go forward.
Mr. Garcia, you now have 30 seconds.
Let's be clear. We are still $800 million short of 2008 levels. There is a lot of room to grow. Doug Ducey has mentioned this several times, and he's referring to the Invest in Ed Act, which was taken off the ballot by his stacked Supreme Court, which only applied to the top 1% of Arizonans and only for income above $500,000. I am not in favor of raising taxes on the middle class. I am in favor of a direct funding source, which is what our teachers have been demanding and what our education system
Lorraine,
needs.
I've got to address that.
All right, gentlemen, we're needing to move on to our follow-up questions regarding education. This one comes from Arizona Public Media's Christopher Conover.
This question is for both of you. We've talked a lot about education funding in the last few minutes. In addition to funding, what, if anything, needs to change in Arizona's education system to see it improve?
Governor Ducey, you have 45 seconds to respond.
Well, the first thing I want to say is David's plan was to double our taxes. That was his education plan. He tried to mislead the voters. The Supreme Court caught him, and it was removed from the ballot. So now there is no plan, but more funding is needed. More funding will be available. Our general fund is at a record high. In addition, we need to address this teacher shortage. We have the Teachers Academy. We need to get more dollars into the classroom, Chris. And I think there's other things that we can do to reform our system so that we can help districts consolidate from a contractual basis, janitorial, maintenance, food service, so that we can push cost out of administration and get the dollars into the classroom for our teachers to benefit our kids.
Mr. Garcia, you have 45 seconds.
If you notice, that answer did not include the most important aspect of education, the classroom. And it's the reason why we need an educator, somebody with a teacher's commitment to education. What we need to do in Arizona is back away from our fascination with standardized testing. There are no multiple choices in life. And the region and the state that gets beyond this fascination with standardized testing is going to lead the rest of the world. We need to bring innovation back to the classroom, creativity back to the classroom, focus on real-world outcomes that make a difference in students' lives. Because in addition to salary, one of the other reasons we lose so many teachers is because we take creative, bright people and we box them in. And under my administration, we are going to let them teach again.
All right, a reminder that each of you have 1 minute to answer each question, followed by a 30-second for a rebuttal. And now we'll go back to the questions, and we are going to switch over to border security. The first question is from Steve Goldstein for Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia, you've made some comments in support of replacing ICE, also opposing a border wall. If there is no wall and no enforcement arm of immigration in that sense, is that jeopardizing the public safety of Arizona residents? And as a quick follow-up to that, do you have an alternative plan?
Steve, both of those statements are not true. I'm against Trump's wall. I'm against Trump's wall because it is an ineffective use of resources, and it's the wrong message to send to our largest trading partner to the south, Mexico. In addition, we are talking about ICE because of the historic cruelties that they have been inflicting, separating families, and I will always stand up against the separation of families. But beyond what I've said, let me tell you what I've done. I took an oath when I was 17 to join the Army. And when I joined the military, I took the oath to defend and protect the United States and our Constitution. It is an oath I take seriously to this day, and I will take that oath with me to the governor's office. With respect to protecting Arizona, what we need to do, what the state needs to do, the governor needs to do our job. The border sheriffs have made it clear that is 24/7 patrols. My opponent said that that would be a priority, and today, our highways are still left unpatrolled for 4 hours because my opponent, Doug Ducey, has not provided the funding for 24/7 patrols as he said he would.
Mr. Ducey, you have 30 seconds.
The fact of the matter is today our highway state troopers endorsed my campaign because they are a fan that we are investing in public safety, that public safety has been a top priority of this governor's office. We've got the border strike force. We deployed the National Guard to the border. We are not asking to abolish ICE like Mr. Garcia is, and we're not asking to remove a wall on our southern border where all these poisonous drugs are coming through. You can hear Mr. Garcia in his own words at factcheckgarcia.com to see his stance on border security.
All right, now a question from Joe Ferguson for Mr. Ducey.
Mr. Ducey, the border strike force is credited with multiple high-profile drug arrests. You said the state is patrolled 24 hours a day, but the sheriffs of both Yuma and Santa Cruz County have told AZPM the Department of Public Safety does not patrol their border counties between midnight and 6 a.m. Are you saying they're wrong?
I'm saying that we have law enforcement 24 hours a day in the state of Arizona, but with our border strike force and with our Arizona state troopers who, like I said, endorsed my campaign today for our stance on public safety, we have prioritized focusing on drug cartels, human trafficking, and child sex trafficking. And I want to give these brave men and women in uniform a real congratulations. You know, just last month in 3 routine traffic stops, they picked up over 200 pounds of methamphetamine and a pound of fentanyl. A pound of fentanyl is lethal to over 170,000 Arizonans. They kept those products out of our high schools and out of our neighborhoods and out of America. Of course, we want to continue to restore additional funding into public safety, but we have needs in education and our teachers as well.
Mr. Garcia, 30 seconds.
This is another example of a broken promise by Doug Ducey. When he came into office, he said that his priority was going to be 24/7 patrols. Because you can have a strike force, but if you are leaving our highways open for 4 hours a night, the very bad actors that you're looking to stop are using our highways to get in. I will make that my priority. I have served and protected, and I know that the foundation of serving and protecting is doing our job. And I will fund the Department of Public Safety to patrol our highways 24/7.
Where will you take the money from, David?
Mr. Ducey, I count 5 interruptions so far, and I believe this is the same pattern we saw last night.
All right, let's move on to a question from Christopher Conover. This one goes to you, Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia, Pima County recently rejected a $1.4 million Stone Garden grant, making it the single largest border county that does not take federal funding. Should Pima County reject that funding? And what do you say to the backlash from residents who disagree with the decision and say that has made Pima County less safe?
One of the things we need to continue to think about here and also take into consideration is where are our priorities. And from my perspective, the state needs to continue to work with local law enforcement and honor their decisions and honor their request. And in this respect, to give you some kind of perspective, the Border Strike Force is 30 or 40 people that come along every once in a while, according to the Yuma County Sheriff. I will always look to them for their input, look to them with respect to what they believe we need, and do our part as a state. With respect to Pima County, I think that this is a situation where they made a decision for themselves, and as a state, we need to work with local authorities to honor those decisions and work together as a team.
Mr. Ducey, 30 seconds.
David's beating up on law enforcement is really getting old. The brave men and women that are in the Border Strike Force put on a uniform every day and put themselves in harm's way. They don't come every now and again. They're focused on the drug cartels, the human trafficking, and the child sex trafficking that's happening in our state. And the statistics and results that they have been very good. I don't know why Pima County would reject additional funding. Funding is scarce in this state. Public safety is a top priority. They should accept those dollars and protect this county.
Let's continue on with border security. The next question is from Steve Goldstein of KJZZ. This one is for you, Mr. Ducey.
Mr. Ducey, let's follow up on the Stone Garden funding. Would you instruct the State Department of Public Safety to use the federal funding that Pima County has decided not to use, and how would you use it?
Well, we do have needs, of course, in public safety. We have needs with our state troopers. So we want to make sure that our highways and byways are safe, but we also want to go where the crime is. And I leave this to the experts, the local law enforcement, our border sheriffs, the expert men and women in our Department of Public Safety. But of course, I want to see all 15 counties in Arizona protected. I want to see Pima County. It's a border county. There are issues that are different and unique because of the traffic that happens from the bad guys, the drug cartels and the human trafficking. So of course, we're going to work in that partnership fashion that we have since I came into office, partnering with our border agents along with the state troopers, local law enforcement, with a focus on stopping the drug cartels that are coming into our state.
Mr. Garcia, 30 seconds.
Mr. Ducey mentioned going where the crime is. The Border Strike Force moves away from the border quite a bit. Actually spends quite a bit of time in Maricopa County as well. The key here is to keep Arizona safe. The Department of Public Safety needs to do their part, and that means we fund them to patrol our highways 24/7. It will be my priority because it is what our border county sheriffs are asking the state to accomplish. And as governor, it will be my priority, not at the end of a term with a broken promise, but in the beginning.
All right, time for a follow-up question. This one from Joe Ferguson of the Arizona Daily Star. Reminder, you each have 45 seconds for a response. Joe?
Gentlemen, we've been talking about the border sheriffs a little bit now. So Sheriff Leon Wilmot of Yuma and Tony Estrada of Santa Cruz County both have vocalized concerns about the role of the strike force. Is the strike force a way of saying the feds and the county can't do what the state and the state needs to step in to help?
Well, I just was in Yuma County spending time with Sheriff Wilmot. We had a wonderful morning together as we went to a place where the Border Strike Force had found a tunnel that had been dug underneath the border where they were delivering drugs into the state of Arizona. Sheriff Wilmot expressed appreciation for the partnership that he has at the state level. And I understand our border sheriffs are independently elected leaders inside our state. It's taken a little while for everyone to accept what we're doing, but we have dollars flowing. We have a state that's safer now, and we have a partnership. We don't have these turf wars that happen in so many other states across our country. We've got our troopers working with our border sheriffs, working with law enforcement to stop the drug cartels and human trafficking.
Mr. Garcia, you have 45 seconds.
The sheriffs have been critical because they're asking the state to patrol our highways 24/7. And it is that commitment that the governor is failing to fund to keep Arizona safe. It was Sheriff Wilmot who mentioned that there, at any given day, there's 1,000 different law enforcement officials in the county on the border working, and that the Border Strike Force accounts for 30 or 40 people who come every once in a while. We need to make this clear and simple so that those at the border who are doing this hard work, and by the way, I find it interesting that a man who has never worn the uniform is prancing in front of those who do, because he may not understand that it's as simple as this: you do your job. And they're asking our job at the state, and the one I will commit to as governor is 24/7 patrols of our highways.
Lorraine,
Governor, I want to give you a chance
I've
to
got to
respond to
address
that.
that.
I'm counting 6.
David, I honor your service and I thank you for it. I'm proud of my background as a business person, but this election is going to be decided on the issues of the future. I think it's important that our viewers know that you hire people into your campaign that post on social media. F Arizona. They call the United States an S-hole country, and they post things with other groups that you've been endorsed by that say F the Border Patrol, and then they go out and protest Paul Penn Zone. It seems to me that you have a real issue with law enforcement.
All right, I want to give Mr.
Lorraine,
Garcia 30
I have
seconds for a
counted
response.
6
I'll keep
different
track
interruptions.
of the
I am
interruptions. I'll
working
give you
hard
30
to be a
seconds
gentleman
now.
here,
Mr. Garcia,
and I am
30
working
seconds
hard
now.
to follow the rules. This is the same pattern we had
I
last
appreciate
night.
that. Let's go with a response. 30 seconds, sir.
Thank you. My response is this: if we're looking at the company we keep, then under Doug Ducey's administration, up to 7 people he has hired in his administration as department heads or otherwise state officials have been under investigation for misconduct. 7. Those are folks that are looking out, are supposed to be looking for Arizona. That is not a business principle, and that's not running the state as a business. With respect to the staffer, she's a young staffer who made a mistake and is going to learn from it. But your decisions have hurt Arizona.
I want to end it there because we
counting
need to
7,
stick to
Lorraine.
format. And I was about to thank you, gentlemen, for allowing us to remain to time. We're about halfway through. Reminder, you have 1 minute to answer each question, 30 seconds for rebuttal. And I believe that we may address some of what you just said, Mr. Garcia. We're going to go back to the questions. The next round of questions will explore decisions to be made and the challenges related to the state's budget and economic development. The first question is from Joe Ferguson of the Arizona Daily Star. This is for you, Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia, how should the state balance its efforts to attract out-of-state companies with nurturing companies that originated here? We know the value of, saying, attracting jobs from California, for example, but what is the level of investment should be focused on that?
On
Attracting jobs.
attracting outside of companies? I'm not sure about the question.
Would you like me to repeat it, sir?
Please.
Joe, clarify.
How should the state balance its efforts to attract out-of-state companies with nurturing companies that originated here? We know the value of saying the state is attracting jobs from California, for example, but what level of investment should be focused on that?
Key issue for economic development in Arizona is education and investing in education. Doug Ducey talks about people coming from outside of Arizona, 120 plus a day. But I'm going to be focused on the almost 7 million people inside Arizona, our fellow residents. The path to economic development to balance out attracting companies from outside of Arizona, as well as developing talent within Arizona, is investing in our human capital. It begins with K-12, but it certainly extends to the community colleges, who are excellent drivers for high-tech manufacturing jobs, for example, and then investing in our universities as places for research and development and innovation. The path, and one of the things we've been missing most in Arizona from an economic development standpoint, is an investment in education so that the people of Arizona can start businesses that build and stay here in Arizona, and we can have the workforce that can attract high-wage jobs to our state.
Mr. Ducey, 30 seconds.
I'm proud that Tucson is experiencing the fastest job growth that it's had in 6 years. And I think the question was about our economy. So I want to see the people inside the state have more opportunities. I want opportunity for all of our citizens. And we've got the 3rd fastest wage growth in the country right now in the state of Arizona. And then I also want to attract opportunities to come here. And I'm proud of Caterpillar and Comcast and Amazon and Raytheon's expansion in southern Arizona. I focused on that. So you can have an improving K-12 education system and an economy that's booming, providing jobs for our kids. A governor's got to balance different priorities. Economy, education, and public safety have been what we're working on in the Ducey administration.
All right, let's move on to the next question. This one from Christopher Conover of Arizona Public Media. This one is for you, Mr. Ducey.
Mr. Ducey, you often say that Arizona is open for business, and that's included a lot of deregulation. What is the definition of open for business?
Great question, Chris. Arizona is open for business. We've had 240,000 new private sector jobs come to the state of Arizona in the last 3 years. We've had 300 companies that have expanded or relocated here. The last time our unemployment rate was this low, people were renting their movies at Blockbuster. People are leaving places like California. The pain level is too high. The cost of living, the oppressive taxes, the regulations. In Arizona, we've simplified and improved our tax code the last 3 years. We've eliminated 676 regulations. We've made it a higher quality of life, a better place to live. In the game of states, people vote with their feet, and Arizona is winning. We're one of the top 5 fastest growing states in the country. And this is where there's a real differentiation between myself and my opponent. His plan for education is to double income taxes in the state of Arizona. All those companies and businesses and investment that we brought here, they'd be going to Nevada or Texas, which has a 0 income tax. So there's a real choice here.
Mr. Garcia, 30 seconds.
The reality is Tucson is nearly at the bottom of almost all economic indicators. They're not growing to the extent the rest of the state is. And when you look at these numbers, let's put them in perspective. Arizona is growing, but so is the rest of the country, nearly every state. And compared to our western neighbors, at the end of 2017, Arizona's job growth rate was behind every single one of our western neighbors with the exception of New Mexico. And the number one reason why, lack of investment in K-12 education and the lack of a highly skilled workforce. It is what we need to focus on this state for Arizona to prosper moving forward.
All right, now a question from Steve Goldstein for Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia, how would you manage the state's surplus of tax revenue? And if you were to spend it, how would you ensure the future availability of a rainy day fund or something similar?
With additional revenue that is going to come into our state as we continue to invest in Arizona and its people, we are going to, make sure we build the rainy day fund so that it's made available. It has helped Arizona in many circumstances of difficult times, and we're going to invest those dollars in public education. It will be my priority. It is what our teachers are asking for so they don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs anymore. It is what our parents are asking for so that we no longer have overcrowded classrooms. It is what we need from an economic development standpoint so that we can invest in the human capital in Arizona. This is particularly important here in Tucson, where the University of Arizona has and should continue to be a strong economic driver. And the way you ensure that is to invest our resources back into education, back into the people of Arizona, so that we are developing that workforce.
Mr. Ducey, 30 seconds.
I don't know if David is intentionally deceiving the viewers or not, but what he's saying about our economy in the state of Arizona is just patently untrue. So we've updated factcheckgarcia.com so people can get the real facts on that. And our general fund does have a surplus right now. It's because our economy is booming. We've got more job creators that are coming here, and there are fatter paychecks for our citizens. So I want to see those dollars going into the classroom, rewarding our teachers, providing public safety, addressing child safety, but we also have needs like transportation in our state. That's the economic backbone of our state. We'll make responsible decisions across the board of how those dollars are invested.
All right, this next question from Joe Ferguson. This question is for Mr. Ducey. Mr.
Ducey, you're fond of saying government at the speed of business. Theranos went out of business. You signed a bill lobbied by a company that the company sell blood tests without a prescription. That company ended up paying out millions to Arizona residents. You asked Uber to remove its self-driving cars after a person was killed. Based on these examples, is the speed of business too fast when it comes to the people's safety and economic security when it's entrusted to the government?
So the first thing I want to say is the first responsibility of the governor is to protect public safety. And why we do have regulations is to protect public health and public safety. We lose over 800 Arizonans a year on our highways due to human error from drivers. I wanted to open up the innovation for this technology of autonomous vehicles to come here, and Google and Waymo and GM and Toyota have done that. Uber did that. What happened in that accident was tragic. Uber's rights have been revoked in the state of Arizona, but I want to see the 38,000 people that die in avoidable accidents across the United States, I want to see that problem solved. And when there's bad actors, when companies misbehave, there will be accountability, and there was accountability for Theranos. Not only did the Attorney General get involved and refunds were conducted, as you said, the company's now out of business, but we still want to be a welcoming place to medical innovations in the state of Arizona while protecting public health and public safety.
Mr. Garcia, 30 seconds, please.
This is another broken promise on behalf of Doug Ducey. He says that public safety is number one, and yet he has put Arizonans at risk. And he's setting Arizona up for another broken promise. Because on the one hand, he's talking about 2020 in a future budget and infrastructure and public safety. But candidate Ducey also said that he would lower income taxes down to nearly zero as possible. Those two things don't add up. There will be a broken promise there because Doug Ducey puts himself in a position to say what he needs to be elected, and puts himself in a position for broken promises for Arizona.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. A format note, we're on the home stretch here. Any overages in the time will come out of closing statements. Let's continue now with a question from Christopher Conover. This one is for you, Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia, we've talked a little bit about transportation. You both have tonight. Many counties, especially those in southern Arizona, are struggling with road repair. Would you support an increase in the state sales tax on gas, or the gas tax, the state's portion, to help pay for road reconstruction and maintenance?
Let me start by indicating how important roads are for rural Arizona specifically. In many of our towns in Arizona, the road in is not only a pathway, it is the lifeline to economic development. And highway funds have been stripped from our budget for several years now. I know they're starting to return, but there is still much more work to be done for rural Arizona. With respect to raising the gas tax, it is an issue. It is a question that has been brought up by several people actually in rural Arizona because they're looking for options. They're looking for options because what the state has routinely done is pass along budget cuts that go to cities and towns and counties, and they have to make up the difference. We are making it harder on them because they have to backfill those budget cuts. And so rural Arizona has a number of ideas, and we're going to listen to them. But ultimately, what they're saying is they need investment at the state level. We need to stop the tax cuts at the top and start investing in all of Arizona.
Mr. Ducey, 30 seconds.
Now that our budget has available dollars, we've been able to reinvest again in roads. Like I said, this infrastructure is the backbone of our economy on delivering goods and services. We were able to accelerate $134 million for SR 189, and we have additional dollars available. We also stopped the sweep of the HERF funds. We're also going to be able to work with this Washington, D.C. Department of Transportation in terms of federal things like I-11 in the state of Arizona. We're not going to raise gas taxes, especially when electric cars are what's coming next.
All right, this question now from Steve Goldstein for Mr. Ducey.
Mr. Ducey, how would you define a livable wage, and how do you help more Arizonans reach that level?
I want to see opportunity for all of our citizens, and I believe that there is dignity in all work. Steve, my dad was a cop. My mom was a waitress. They raised myself, my brother, and my sister, and they did a pretty good job. I want to see people be able to climb the economic ladder. So right now we have more jobs available in the state of Arizona than we have people that are available to fill them. I want to see an economy that can be innovative and nimble and attract companies here, and also let entrepreneurs bring their ideas to market. So I want to see everyone be able to climb that economic ladder. Of course, that livable wage is going to be different for different people in different stages of life. But what I want to see is that opportunity for people to earn, to have a job, the good habits and good decisions that come from having that job that can be turned into a fulfilling career. That's what we're doing by restoring our K-12 education funding so people have skills when they graduate and they can go out and pursue happiness in the marketplace.
Mr. Garcia, 30 seconds.
I believe that a livable wage, in my opinion, is after a full week's work, 40 hours, you have the money necessary that you need to raise a family. And this is particularly important to our teachers because I want to make sure that our teachers are treated as professionals so that they're not working 2 or 3 jobs. And our standard, if we want to keep the best and brightest in Arizona's classrooms, is to ensure that teachers don't have to do that they can stay in the classroom, work 1 job, and continue to raise a family.
And now for a follow-up question from Steve Goldstein of KJZZ, and a reminder, you will each have 45 seconds to respond.
Gentlemen, where do higher education and economic development intersect? The legislature has cut university funding a great deal. We've heard about Arizona State, University of Arizona being very innovative universities, but where is state support coming from there?
Certainly higher education and economic development intersect because it is the human capital associated with our universities and the human capital associated with our graduates that attracts companies to Arizona who have high-tech jobs. Look, our universities in particular need to be areas of innovation, but it goes beyond that. Our community colleges, which were zeroed out under Doug Ducey, are the key economic driver. It is the place where most students begin their higher education journey, and to keep college costs affordable and to continue to focus on a highly skilled workforce, we need to invest in community colleges as well. Because community colleges can develop a strata of high wage jobs in manufacturing, robotics, for example, in health sciences that can help drive our economy. And so it is through higher education that you're able to attract the talent to Arizona.
Mr. Ducey, 45 seconds, please.
As a proud entrepreneurial fellow from the Eller School of Management, of course I think that our universities are critical. And I'm very proud that I served on the Board of Regents that brought Bobby Robbins to the U of A, and I applaud him on a great start at the University of Arizona. We also have Michael Crow at Arizona State University and Rita Chang. We see that our universities have been recognized as the most innovative universities in the nation 4 years in a row, beating out places like MIT and Stanford. I was also happy that we were able to advance a $1 billion bond for our universities so that these fine presidents don't have to play Mother May I into the future, so that they can have the adjustments to bring in the technology and innovation that they need in a 21st century economy.
All right, gentlemen, we have about 15 minutes remaining. Our final group of questions addresses an assortment of issues and challenges facing Arizona. The first question goes to Mr. Garcia. This comes from Christopher Conover.
This question is actually for both of you. Mr. Garcia, you get to answer first. Water is a disappearing commodity. We live in the desert. Years ago, Tucson paid residents to get rid of their lawns, saving millions of gallons. Would you support a state law requiring the same for the rest of the state, including Phoenix and Maricopa County?
If I could think of an issue that keeps me up at night, it's water. Because water is the lifeblood of Arizona, and it's one that we cannot play politics with water. This is another example of my opponent and a broken promise. Water has always been an issue in Arizona, and it will continue to be. And yet my opponent has politicized this issue by failing to bring all parties to the table in the beginning of his administration. He's going to say that it's starting to happen now, but it's another half measure. Arizona has been a leader in water, and I will continue to lead going forward. And one of the first things we will focus on is bringing all parties together and working on addressing Arizona's drought contingency plan, working on conservation measures, and building the kind of trust and transparency that Arizona leadership has shown in the past instead of politicizing this issue. Of that, we will listen to everyone involved and local constituencies to make that decision.
Mr. Ducey, you have 30 seconds for a response.
Arizona is among the best in the world at water, second possibly only to Israel. And we stand on the shoulder of giants, people like Carl Hayden and Bruce Babbitt and John Rhodes. And it's part of the reason that I asked Senator John Kyle to replace the irreplaceable Senator John McCain, because he is a water expert now back in the United States Senate. There are things we need to do to address today's water needs, both from a reform perspective and from a generational perspective. We'll have the reforms done in this next session through the drought contingency plan. I talked to Senator Kyle about it today.
The next question is from Steve Goldstein. This one is for Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia, why isn't Arizona a leader, as many people think it should be, as far as solar energy production is concerned? And how important is solar, how important is alternative energy to you as Arizona looks to the future?
Well, let me start by noting another broken promise on behalf of my opponent. This is a major issue. Water was a major issue when he walked in the door, and he is promising in another administration to solve it. It is a common theme of a broken promise and a half measure on behalf of my opponent, Doug Ducey. With respect to solar energy, Arizona should be a leader in solar energy. We should be a solar superpower. And from my perspective, we are going to focus on solar energy and renewable energy sources, because beyond water, we also need to look at the sustainability and long-term aspects of our economy and of our energy structure. It has not come about because we have particularly energy companies locally who are not investing as much as they need to in everyday Arizonans. And for that to happen, we need leadership that is going to make it a priority that we become a solar superpower. We focus on solar energy, because for me personally, this is one that we need to leave behind, an Arizona that is better than the one we founded on behalf of our generation and for kids like my daughters.
Mr. Ducey, your response, please.
My policy on energy is all of the above. I want to see solar, I want to see wind, I want to see innovation and technologies come to Arizona. But my first concern is for the Arizonans that are on a fixed income, the Arizonans that are vulnerable and that are living paycheck to paycheck. My opponent supports an initiative that would raise the cost of energy in our state $1,000 per family and take a tremendous amount of money out of our public K-12 education system. So I want affordable and accessible energy, and I want clean energy.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Joe Ferguson for Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia, one plan would count the Palo Verde nuclear plant as clean energy. Would you agree that it should be counted as a clean form of energy?
In this discussion, I've heard both sides, that it should or it should not be included as clean energy. I think the key here is renewable energy is what we're focusing on, so that we can have an energy source that continues to renew itself, continues to contribute. My focus is going to be on solar. It is low-hanging fruit in Arizona, and it's a low-hanging fruit in Arizona because we have so much solar resources. Let's start there. Let's work on solar energy. I am in favor of Proposition 127 because we need to do more in energy. Look, one of the things you get with Doug Ducey is a lack of imagination and telling us over and over again what we can't do instead of focusing on what we can. In terms of energy, we can do more in solar energy. We need to do more in solar energy. And yet the governor, Mr. Ducey, continues to talk about what we cannot do. My focus is going to be on what we can.
Mr. Ducey, response, please.
I believe that nuclear energy is clean energy, and when David Garcia asks you to imagine what's possible, what you should imagine is a $1,000 tax increase, because that's what would happen if Proposition 127 were to pass at the ballot box. And it's not only for each family in the state of Arizona. Imagine what that would do to our schools in terms of taking dollars that could be going to our teachers or our classrooms. So what I'm trying to do is bring a common sense approach that allows our state to grow, that allows renewables to come here, that improves our environment, our water and our air and our environment. But we can do it in a way where it's not mandated at the ballot box.
All right, this next question is from Christopher Conover. Christopher.
Mr. Ducey, the Navajo generating station in northern Arizona is no longer for sale and is set to be converted to natural gas. That will cost jobs on the Navajo and Hopi reservations. What can be done to help by the state to help the members of those tribes who rely on the generating station and the related coal mines for jobs, and how would you pay for that state help?
Well, first I want to say that we know about the economy here in southern Arizona. We know what's happening in Maricopa County and Phoenix, but we do need to focus on our rural areas and our tribal lands. We have the Arizona Assets Map available, and we also have Opportunity Zones, is something with the federal tax reform that's available in the state. So I want to focus on these issues, and we're seeing some successes in Yavapai and Coconino and Pinal County with Lucid Motors and Nikola Motors deciding it as well. I want to see these same opportunities happening in our rural and tribal areas. I'm working with our Arizona Commerce Authority so that we can build on the successes that we have in the state of Arizona, that we can have a tax code and a regulatory environment that not only brings businesses to the state of Arizona in these places, but also allows people in those places to create their own companies, to build their own businesses, and to have that type of environment.
Mr. Garcia, 30 seconds.
This is another example of Doug Ducey being a follower. Solar energy has been an opportunity for Arizona for a very long time. And only after the voters of Arizona, the citizens of Arizona, put an initiative on the ballot is he coming out and saying something about it. In addition, we continue to hear the same gloom and doom rhetoric from Mr. Ducey. He said, after going back to Proposition 206, for example, the minimum wage increase, that it would crush Arizona's economy. And that is not what happens. And so with respect to the Navajo Nation, I believe that we should focus on a transition to solar.
All right, gentlemen, we have just a few minutes remaining. Our final follow-up question now from Christopher Conover.
School safety was a priority for many voters this year. The legislature failed to pass a school safety plan this year. If you are governor next year, what will you do to get a plan through? What will that plan look like? And will it include firearms in the classroom held by teachers?
Mr. Ducey, 45 seconds, please.
School safety is a priority for me. We put the Arizona Safe Schools plans forward. We were able to get some of it passed, and I want to tell you how I did it. I was in Washington, D.C. at the governor's only meeting. Rick Scott was in the aftermath of Parkland, and I thought, why do governors always be reactive on this? Let's be proactive in the state of Arizona. So we put together a plan that when it comes to life could stop, prevent, or avoid every mass shooting that's happened since Columbine. And it includes school resource officers, which are cops on campus. This is a real difference between David and I. He would remove school resource officers. His plan is that actually kids should run for cover. I want to make sure that our schools are safe and that there's law enforcement available. If there is a shooting, the first person you're going to call is the police department. Why would you remove them from campus if you could have them there?
Mr. Garcia, 45 seconds, please.
This is another failure on behalf of Doug Ducey. He started talking about gun safety and school safety after a March for Our Lives. Thank you to all those young people who made this an issue. He is following this issue because, again, it is going to hurt him politically. And he is yet to meet with the March for Our Lives young people for solutions. We want to find out what works best for high schools. We need to talk to the students that are in them. I'm against more weapons on campus. What we need are more eyes and ears, more guidance counselors, more opportunities for our young people to go to. We have one of the highest student to guidance counselors ratio in the country. For every guidance counselor, they serve over 900 students. We need to begin there and not follow this issue with another broken promise.
Gentlemen, thank you for honoring the format of tonight's debate, and that is all the time we have for questions. Each of you will now have 1 minute for a closing statement. First, we go to you, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm David Garcia, and I am running to invest in our schools. I am running to stamp out corruption at the state level, and I am running to make sure we build a state that works for all of Arizona. What we need more than anything is opportunity, and that opportunity comes through public education. I will invest in public education. We will not have a governor more committed to public education than me, because I know that is the pathway to economic development and the American dream. We also need integrity. We need a governor that Arizona can trust, not one that is going to resort to an amateurish hit website at the end of 4 years to make his case. And we also need a governor who is ready to look out for the people of Arizona, somebody who understands what it means to struggle and was ready to stand with our teachers and our working families across the state. I will be that governor, and I would be honored to have your vote. Thank you.
Mr. Garcia, thank you. And now, Mr. Ducey, your closing statement.
My campaign was endorsed 4 years ago, calling me Arizona's governor for tough times. And we've navigated through some tough times together. We've balanced that budget. We've put dollars into K-12 education, a 20% pay increase for our teachers, and we focused on public safety. I want to secure Arizona's future economically with our budget, inside our schools, and at the border. I think you can see a dramatic difference between someone who wants to build on the momentum that is happening today in the state of Arizona and my opponent that would go in the wrong direction and make Arizona a carbon copy of California. I'm asking for your vote tonight. I'd love to be able to do this job for 4 more years. You can go to Doug Ducey on Facebook, DougDucey.com, or at Doug Ducey on Twitter. And to fact check what my opponent says, please go to factcheckgarcia.com to get the facts. Thanks for spending the evening with us.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. And that concludes the Your Vote 2018 gubernatorial debate. My thanks to our panel of journalists, including our very own Christopher Conover and our partners in tonight's debate, Steve Goldstein of our sister station in Phoenix, KJZZ, and Joe Ferguson of the Arizona Daily Star, and of course to the candidates, Mr. Ducey and Mr. Garcia. Thank you. And thank you again for honoring the format of tonight's debate. I do appreciate that very much. All right, don't forget you're welcome to visit our website, azpm.org, if you'd like to watch tonight's debate. Also on our radio website as well. And remember, Arizona Public Media is committed to continuing to honor debate forums here throughout the election cycle in the weeks leading up to November. Our thanks to you at home for tuning in online and at home. Don't forget, Election Day is on Tuesday, November 6th. For all of us at Arizona Public Media, I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thank you and have a good night.